Well, hello and welcome to the Smells Like Money podcast. Join me, Suzan Taylor, the DooDoo Diva, as I interview guests who are making an impact on how we manage and operate systems for conveying and treating wastewater. As a veteran of the wastewater, trenchless, and civil infrastructure industry, each week I'll be bringing you industry know-how from industry pros who know how. Join me each week as I speak with representatives of organizations that are utilizing disruptive or new technologies and methods, and executives who are excited to share how to be successful and sustainable in our vital industry. So whether you want to learn about the latest trends in technology, in treatment or trenchless, gain tips on training and retaining great talent, or simply how to be more efficient, productive, or profitable, this podcast is for you. Ready? Let's dive right in. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the DooDoo Diva Smells Like Money podcast. We are visiting again with Nick Spano of Essential Equipment. And Nick and I, we're going to kind of stick our necks out here a little bit, and hopefully we don't make any enemies, and talk about what some might consider a bit of a controversial subject for our industry. And that is a lot of the changes that we've been seeing in recent years with mergers and acquisitions. And large companies, and we're going to be bringing up a chart a little bit later on screen for reference, of larger well-known names or venture capital firms coming in and investing in the wastewater and the trenchless industry. And what that means for us as an industry as a whole, and the pros and the cons behind this. Because for the most part, most of the companies that have been around for a long time in our industry were privately held. And now they're becoming part of conglomerates, a item on a portfolio, and publicly held, which means it has to operate under a different standard, how it's going to look to Wall Street. So with that said, Nick, we've just seen a rapid change. I mean, changes that I would never have imagined, 10 years ago, but it just seems like mergers and acquisitions have really taken off. What's your take on that? I mean, do you see this as this is just the life cycle of our industry, or something else really happening here?
Wow, big questions. Good afternoon, first off.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Great to be back. Yeah, thank you. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I'm certainly no expert on any of this. I've been in the business for about a dozen years, but I mean, for most of that, I certainly wasn't paying attention to, anything to do with corporate acquisitions, really just learning how to, run a CCTV camera. So for me, this is all pretty recent and pretty new in terms of researching it and becoming interested in it. I think it is something that's going to affect the industry greatly. Not sure if it's going to be positive or negative. I suppose that could go either way, right? Depending on how these corporations, treat their acquisitions, and if they retain their values or if they try to change things. And we'll just have that's a time will tell type issue for sure, but it's still fun to talk about. It's still interesting,
right.
From a business perspective.
One thing that I saw was a shift of, won't name names here, and I thought it was kind of interesting to watch, of regionalized, very strong, very profitable contractors, sewer service contractors, trenches contractors, now becoming part of like a group of contracting companies, and still kind of maintaining a little bit of their original brand, but yet now being part of this bigger corporate umbrella. And I've often, just looking on the sidelines, is like, okay, well, what will that mean to the customers? Is it going to improve customer service, help them with acquisition of more equipment? Because now you've got, hopefully, if you've been acquired by another very successful firm, you're going to have an inflow of capital. Or is it going to mean, like you were saying about the corporate culture, I am now going to make you fit my model. I don't really care about your model. And if you don't like it, there's the door. And that's kind of just for anybody who's ever been through, and I know many of this, and I'm one of them, on a buyout in this industry, is that there are some companies that will have that attitude that every employee has an expiration date on their forehead. And then there's that term of, depending on their model, let's right, quote unquote, right size the company. What does that mean exactly? Like, I'm all for when you talk about, done a little research on this Six Sigma lean, and that doesn't mean that you're going to, just completely cut the staff in half. No, it's you're going to come in and look to try to make it more efficient and more productive, and maybe make people happier in their job because you're giving them a way to do what they've been doing in a much more streamlined process, so jobs are easier. But I think the big fear is it going to be just a great big hacking fest? And I think back on that movie, what was with George Clooney, that award-winning movie where he's in charge of going into companies and being the guy to tell everybody, okay, here's your exit packet, you've been laid off. I think it was called Up in the Air. And I think that's what it was. I think we all worry about that in the industry, that people who have a lot of knowledge and skill, are they going to wind up on the chopping block?
Yeah, I don't know. I have a little more optimistic view on it, I think, but I haven't been through it, in my career. But I think kind of going back to what we've talked about before, what we talked about on the LinkedIn infrastructure panel, the transference of knowledge is still, I think, at the top of everyone's mind. So I don't know that it would be, some kind of mass layoff, especially considering that a lot of the knowledge has yet to be transferred.
Yeah, you would hope that they would recognize that,
I mean, we deal with several companies that kind of fall into this category of being owned by, larger corporations, but they're still good people to work with. It still doesn't change, day in and day out. It's the same guys that were doing the work before. So maybe it makes their jobs better. Maybe they get new equipment. Maybe they get better training. Maybe, if we're trying to be optimistic about it, there could be lots of.
We want to be. We want to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe higher awareness of safety. If that's, something important to the shareholders of that company, which
right.
You'd think it would be. So yeah, I think it's pros and cons for sure. It's interesting to watch, if nothing else.
Yeah, we've seen some. You've got sharing capabilities for those of you who are tuning in on video. Go ahead and bring that up, and I guess we can read it aloud, Nick. It was just some of the hierarchy of the companies and who's under whose umbrella. And for if nothing else, it's just kind of interesting to see the lumping of it. I think probably one of the most interesting ones that took place was when Toro, famous for the lawnmowers, acquired, who was it they acquired? They acquired Subsite, and
RST, Subsite.
which had been RST. When God rest his soul, when Rod Sutliff had passed on, and then they sold the family sold its interest, and it became Subsite. And they were grouped in another group with, who was it? Ditch Witch.
Yeah.
And so now they're all part of Toro. And a lot of us laughed like, well, gee, if I buy that 6-inch crawler, can I get a free ride-em mower? It was just like a number of us in the industry couldn't understand why Toro, would be interested in CCTV cameras and locators. And so that brings up the point of, guess what? We are a really good industry to invest in, because these companies are not stupid. They're not going to put their money into something risky. I think that they see the opportunity within this industry, that it's only going to grow.
You were saying earlier, I think, if I'm not mistaken, so disclaimer, like, I'm not, this should all be taken with a grain of salt.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Expertly researched. This is just Googling, just Just throwing that out there. If I have something incorrect, certainly not, intentional.
Okay.
But there's an article here, just talking about Toro acquiring Charles Machine Works, which I believe that RST was part
Right.
of. Is that right? Sound right to you?
Yes. Yep. They were all part of that group.
Yeah. Which is pretty recent. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
was when this article came out.
2019. It was, yeah, I
Yeah.
remember it was right before COVID.
Yeah. So yeah, it is. I think, it does speak to our industry. Like you said, it's a great industry. Lots of investors want to be part of this, especially with the new infrastructure bill, whatever that's going to mean. So yeah, I think it's exciting. I mean, like I said,
It
it's
is
exciting to
exciting.
watch and exciting to learn about. I don't know if it's exciting to be part of.
Yeah, sometimes when you go through a merger and acquisition, for those who are used to a corporate culture, especially a family-owned business, it can be a huge adjustment. And some people can make the adjustment and others can't. They just simply can't. It's because dynamics when you go from private to public, because you're under a microscope when you're a public company. It's like you think, oh, great, influence, influx of capital, but it does come at a price. It's, what's that old expression? There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you are under a microscope and you have a lot more reporting and a lot more things that you have to be worried about from a legal standpoint, like you were saying, safety. And it's just, it's like you were saying, it's interesting to watch. And you would hope that when these things happen, because we are a good industry to invest in, that investment is made into making sure there is continued product development. And even more so, what you were saying, safety training and workforce development. We talked earlier about, new technologies, introducing new technologies, and then also workforce development and NASCO getting involved in, trying to encourage people to come into this industry. And so throughout this process, I think it's going to be important that when these mergers and acquisitions take place, that there be that communication about how vital this industry is. And we have to make working in maybe what is going to be the new face of our industry an exciting place, a place filled with opportunity, and not just, oh, I'm going to work today because it's a good job and I'm collecting a paycheck.
Right.
That most people that are in our industry are so passionate, and we need to make sure that that passion doesn't get snuffed out because of having to conform to, I don't know. I know I'm getting a little controversial here, but that they don't try to force people, what is that? The square peg into the round hole.
Right.
And lose talent in the process. Really valuable talent.
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. I'm sure they know going in that they're not going to, retain all of the employees,
right,
even if they want to. But again, they have, massive resources,
Yeah. And that's the other thing, is that they have the massive resources to hire and to expand, and the benefits can actually be fantastic when you're part of a really big corporate conglomerate, just because of their buying power. So it's not something a buyout is not something to be scared of in all cases.
Right, exactly. And from an efficiency standpoint, that's something that was, like you, sounds like we're interested in that. From, you mentioned like Lean and Six Sigma and those type of processes. And, if you've got a corporate safety culture that works, you don't need to necessarily retain the one that you got with your new company that you bought. And maybe there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, it's just I just found it when you brought up that chart, that a few of these I was aware of, and it's like, oh, I didn't know they were part of that group. And so that opens up, well, to be aware of these groups that are forming, that maybe there's to me, it almost seems like a built-in referral network because they're serving and providing different things that are still, they're all going after the same customer base, but with
Right.
different things and different services and different solutions, that it stands to reason that, wow, there's an opportunity there for these different business units to maybe help each other and not be, I'm here, you're there, us, them, that being a tap, a, a bucket for the industry to tap.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We kind of, I think we talked about cues and peer point and radio detection last time, all
Yes,
the umbrella of SPX. And I mean, to me, that seems like an advantage for them. Um, it's definitely all products that companies in our industry need.
right. And cross selling, because you've
Without
got two different styles of things. So if somebody doesn't like one thing, they can say, oh, well, I could get that too.
right, start sharing that. I'm sure they share their technology, share their innovations. How can this particular feature of a Q's product benefit a certain peer point product? I mean, I'm
Right.
making all this up, but I mean that's what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Any other comments on this? Feel like as you were watching it, what have been your most interesting observations in this of just, you were interested. I would like to know what made it fascinating for you to watch the M&As.
well, I guess I didn't realize how prevalent it was, so as I did a little bit of research, it just kept coming. You kept finding examples of all of these. And again, it's not a good or bad thing, but
Right.
it is interesting. And it's not something I was really ever aware of. I mean, it did make a difference. When we used to use certain kind of cameras, that's what we used. It didn't matter to us who owned the company. But I just find it interesting from being a business owner now myself. It's interesting to, I guess, think about all the possibilities and think about how these all of our industry, we know it's small, but now it seems even smaller when you start thinking of that these different companies are now not the same company, but part of the same group.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether it's manufacturers, whether it's contractors, it just makes the world seem a little bit smaller, I guess, which I find interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a small, yeah, you're right. It's a small world. And does it mean though that we're going to have fewer choices because it'll be just a few big companies controlling the bulk of what we need to access? And it's kind of like, well, I don't like, I don't want to go negative here, but let's just say someone says, well, I really don't like the way they do business, or I don't like this, or I don't like that, but I really love this product. And it kind of forces the hand of, well, if you want it, you're going to have to deal with that.
Yeah, I
Do you
mean,
think it's going to limit the choice of the buyer, the consumer?
sure. I mean, can we draw parallels from other industries?
Yeah,
Where do we
yeah.
do the bulk of our shopping now? I mean, Amazon, Walmart. We don't have Kmart anymore. It was effectively basically the same thing as Walmart. Kmart's gone. Um, we kind of see that in so many other areas of our life. I guess it's not surprising it's going to happen in the underground infrastructure business as well.
That's a really good analogy.
So somebody who, I mean, I just had Amazon boxes dropped off at my door a few minutes ago. So, for me, wow, how convenient. That was great.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah,
But
I would agree.
I mean, I think they're about to have a big strike with their workers are about to go on strike. So maybe not everyone thinks that Amazon is so great. I don't know. Um, so I'm sure you're going to have all of those same heartaches with our industry.
Yeah, and the
If
growing
prices come
pains with
down,
the, yeah.
if all these contractors come together as one, Walmart of sewer inspection, it might bring the cost down for many
Mhm.
municipalities that might be struggling with budgets. So they might think it's
Yeah.
great. Um, but maybe there's also drawbacks, like you said. I mean,
There's
will
pros
we
and
have
cons in every change. And it's I remember years ago I was introduced to a book, if you're not aware of, it's called Who Moved My Cheese? And it's just a great, it's maybe a 20-minute read, but how we all deal with change.
Yeah. I have
And
read.
yeah. And I think that's the way we kind of have to look at it, and adopt kind of a wait and see. We're saying a wait and see and hope for the best. I haven't seen any real negative fallout from it, or any rumblings or anything that I have heard. I just found it, I wanted to have the conversation with you. It's like, do you find it a little odd that certain companies are wanting to, that are completely unrelated to what we do, are all of a sudden interested in getting involved?
Yeah,
You
I
know?
don't, yeah, to me, it's not super surprising. And like you said, I don't think anything really super negative has happened that I'm aware of.
No, me either. I just
It's,
found it like, I wanted to discuss the topic. Does anybody else find it interesting that companies that are totally unrelated are wanting to come into this field? A
yeah, I
field
think it's
that most people, kind of identify with, I don't want to say it, but a bit of a yuck factor.
yeah, it's exactly what I was
This
saying.
isn't exactly what I'd call a clean, white collar industry, selling a thing that you can pick up at your local, Walmart or on Amazon online. That this is really, hands-on, in some cases, dirty work.
I think the whole corporate buyout thing, I think that's just a cultural thing. It just has some stink on it, just from I think everybody identifies with the little guy. Everybody,
Especially in our industry, because there's so many little guys.
yeah. So I think it just has this automatic kind of stank on it. Um, but what it actually, results in, I
Well, then
think.
let's discuss that. Maybe, for those who are listening that maybe are from some of these bigger companies, since that is a perception that's in the market of, oh God, my favorite little mom and pop got bought out. What's that going to mean for me? What can these companies do to, I guess, eliminate or ease the fear of the industry that I'm not going to get what I've been used to having, and that I need and I rely on? That what do they need to do as they're acquiring and coming in to take a look, to make sure that these little guys that have relied on this company they just acquired don't go away? Because as you know, in this industry, it's a finite number of customers, and it costs you 5 times as much to get a new customer as it does to retain a happy existing customer who's going to recommend you to all of his friends. So what are the things that they have to absolutely make sure that they maintain for our industry in order to be profitable? I mean, they bought a company because it was profitable. They don't buy a loser or invest in a loser. They buy a company because it's making money. And then a lot of times they come in, and then they get rid of all the things that made that company successful. And you have to shake your head and go, okay, you bought it because it was successful, and then you eliminated everything that made it a great company, and you expect it to still be successful. Like, okay, how's that work? So anyway, I've just seen it happen a few times. So what should they
I
do?
would love
What should they think about?
if I don't know, maybe we can get somebody on the next episode or the next roundtable that works for one of these companies. They could give us a perspective
That is a really good. Oh,
their
we hadn't really mentioned that. For those of us who are listening, Nick and I are part of a great group that was headed up by Chad, I'm going to mispronounce his name, Smeltzer, and it from Bid Curement. And it's the Sewer Infrastructure Roundtable. And it's a live event that's going to be taking place monthly. And we've been promoting it on LinkedIn. And the last discussion was quite lively, that was discussing new technologies.
We talked about this very thing a bit
New
on there as well, didn't we?
technologies, and how do we get municipalities to accept new technologies and new companies, which also could be a problem when it's a new acquisition, because now you're under a new name. And so it's again getting over that change, getting over that hurdle and what needs to be done. So just we digressed, but what would be some of your suggestions? Here you're an equipment dealer. You rely on a certain manufacturer to do business with you a certain way, and they get acquired. What should they be thinking about as they want to maybe continue keeping you as a dealer? What do they need to make sure that they really take a careful look at and keep in place? Obviously, they want to make changes for their model, but what do they need to be sensitive to?
No, boy, I don't even know where to start with that. I'm so fortunate. All the companies that I deal with are all, I mean, basically family owned, which I view as a real blessing. I mean, maybe it could be better if they were owned by a big corporation. I don't know any other way. But Rapid View and IBOC and GapVax, I mean, it's just it's so easy to work with them. You know what I mean? It's just a core group of people. You know their names. You've been to their facilities. You know how their company works and operates, and you know the people in the shipping department and the parts department, and that there's a lot of value to that for me as a dealer. It's not just some email address. It's Jim. I know that I can call Jim.
And there it is. There it is. It's the people.
Yeah, it
is. The greatest asset is the people.
And so I think, I mean, as long as a NYSE company realizes that and maintains, just like you said, maintains what makes it special, then what is it? It doesn't matter really.
And we're a cottage industry in a way. It's very specialized. There's, it's not like we're selling screwdrivers at every hardware store. Right. It's specialized equipment for very specialized technicians and operators. And there's only so many of them in the world. It's not like the next customer is on the next corner, easily found or easily won.
And I guess that would be the outside concern, is if a company comes in, purchases up whomever, does anyone in their company understand anything about our business?
Yeah.
And for sure, that's, maybe they've already acquired a half dozen other sewer contractors. So they do have plenty of people that know exactly how to operate a sewer services company. So it's, it's just something to ponder, I guess. Like I said, would love to have anyone, hope that's okay, Chad. I'd love to have anybody, weigh in at the next roundtable. That
would be good, because I think you're right. You're right. There is that it is about the people, and it is about and their knowledge that if you don't, you're acquiring a company because you think it's a great investment, but you really know nothing about how that industry operates. And you may have bought up 5 other very successful companies and helped them. But our industry, and as you know this, it's extremely unique. And the marketing and sales model within this industry is unlike anything else that you might, work in. It's not your typical B2B business model or B2C. And I think that's what they need to be made aware of, is that what you've used successfully in other types of businesses may not work as well as you think in a very unique niche market like ours, and how business is done, and the channels, and that a lot of big Wall Street, they look at it from your 30, your 60, your 90-day projection, and looking at those numbers only in that very, very, very small window. And they forget that a lot of times with municipal sales, we can't look at things in a 90-day window. We're talking to that person now, but we may not close that deal for 18 months. And so that can often be a real sticking point, where you feel that pressure to perform for the stock market instead of performing under the way that our industry actually does business on the timelines. And I think a lot of these big companies, they don't understand the challenges of our long timelines. It is a long sales cycle.
I can imagine like a corporate accountant looking at something like, hold on, you drove this vacuum truck to West Texas to show a customer. You spent $1,000 on fuel, 27 labor hours to go there and back and to do the demonstration. And what happened? Nothing. There's no revenue associated with all of these expenses.
There you go. Yep.
Oh, you're telling me that they're going to buy a truck next October. Oh, I mean, if you didn't understand that,
and they don't, they
wild,
don't.
Right?
Yeah, it's an education process. That was one of the first things when I got into this industry back in '98, in doing, in marketing and looking at, okay, when do you expect that lead that you just generated to actually turn into something where you could quantify and say, hey, that campaign I ran resulted in this much of sales. Was it successful? That not being able to get your metrics back sometimes almost 2 years out.
Sure. Yeah.
That presents a real challenge for a marketing person, because you're kind of working blind. Did the campaign work or not?
Yeah.
Do we keep doing more of it, or do we pivot and shift? Because we have to wait so long to know, did it really work or not?
Right. So, I mean, we did an old school mail out. Like, we mailed postcards to hundreds of customers. And, the next week we got one call. The next week we got another call. But, it's what did it work? Is that card still sitting on their desk? So in 6 months, when they go to replace their push camera, do they already know they're going to call me, but I have no idea that they're going to call? It's difficult.
I'm glad we brought this subject up and kind of segued into this, because I think that is something that any company looking to invest and acquire needs to be made aware of, the reality of what happens on the ground with sales.
Yes. I mean, it's like glorified door-to-door selling to some degree.
Yes.
A lot of it's still extremely manual, walking indoors, asking for public work directors or wastewater supervisors.
Building relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And that's, it's a struggle for all of us, new companies, old companies. I mean,
this is not an industry for people who lack patience.
Yes.
And tenacity. I mean, you have to really be patient and tenacious, and, keep in contact, keep building the relationship without being annoying, but to stay in the game.
Right.
It's almost like slow and steady. What is that? Like, not like the rabbit, the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady wins the race. Yeah, that you can't quit too soon in this industry. What is it? It could take up to 10 touch points before someone may actually say yes. Yeah. It's not like other things where someone's going to give you, 3 no's, and then finally on the 4th time they'll give you a yes. Yeah, we're very, very unique that way. But yeah, well, thank you, Nick, for, at least being willing to have this dialogue. It's been something I've been pondering and wondering how kind of people felt about it, and do they see the same things that I do? And hopefully we haven't gotten any haters here. We're not here to, stir up the pot. It's just some observations. And
nice
I'd be curious to know what people think about it. What have been their experiences with all these changes that we're seeing in the industry? Has it benefited you? Has it made things more challenging? Has it made things more exciting? Has it made things more efficient? It'd be really cool to know, to get some feedback, maybe in the comments of what's been your experience as we see our industry kind of change face and get some new names.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important just to try to also identify positives of any situation.
Yep.
I think in the social media age, I think the knee jerk is to talk about what's negative.
Yes.
But for sure, if we think about it, life has is better than it ever has been in the history of the world for almost everyone in the world. So I don't know. I think it's important to try to identify some positive things, even if they're not always the most obvious in these situations.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, I love the idea. We'll have to take that up, and maybe it'll be on a sewer infrastructure roundtable. We'll talk about this a little bit more. But thank you for those of you who tuned in today for this conversation with Nick. If you're interested in connecting with Nick, he is on LinkedIn. That's Nick Spano, Spano. His website is essentialequipment.com. And he is located in where in Texas?
Just north of Houston.
Just north of Houston.
Conroe, Texas, kind of Spring. The addresses are weird around there, but we just call it Houston.
Right. So if you're in the market for CCTV or sewer pipe cleaning equipment, you might want to look Nick up and strike up a conversation and see how he might be able to help you. So until next time, thank you again for joining us, and keep it flowing. Thanks so much for joining me, the DooDoo Diva, on this week's episode of Smells Like Money. What stood out to you this week? Share your takeaways by leaving me a review. You can find out more about the new technologies, creating sustainable solutions, and insights on how to succeed in our vital industry by subscribing to the show. Whether you want to learn about the latest trends in wastewater infrastructure, treatment, or trenchless, you've got it all right here at Smells Like Money. If you're an industry expert and would like to be considered as a guest for the show, book a quick chat with me by visiting calendly.com/the2it group/B-A-podcast-guest, or simply click the link in the show notes below. Until next week, a big shout out to all my industry friends and those who will be. You are my superheroes. Thanks for tuning in, keeping it flowing, and we'll see you all next week.